Food and Wine Insider is a weekly look at a $1.5 trillion industry touching every American. Devoted to the business of purveying food and decanting wines, Food and Wine Radio is a unique program highlighting not food recipes or wine vintages, but how to make a profit while satisfying America's palates. In this competitive but highly rewarding sector, many men and women have made profits while fulfilling a dream. Food and Wine Insider is all about better managing any business involving food and wine. Each week, your co-hosts sit down with successful restaurateurs, food mavens, winery vintners, store owners, food suppliers, and other leaders in the worldwide industry that centers on foodstuff and wine. In frank give-and-take sessions, guests and panelists talk about the business of bringing healthy and pleasurable foods and wines to others. Your Food and Wine Radio host are Ann Daw, former president of the Specialty Food Association and a longtime food executive who has held senior positions both here and abroad with Kraft Foods and Philip Morris. Don Mazzella, a nationally known business commentator. On each show, they invite leaders of the world's culinary and wine industries to share the secrets of their success. Visit us at foodandwineinsider.com.
And Courtney Lohmann is Director of Culture, Koncept Events, and here to talk about a very unique part of our industry. Courtney, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here today.
Without a word, I'm going to turn it over to you and Ann, because what you talk about is so important.
Thanks so much, Don. I just want to repeat, Courtney Lohmann is with Koncept Events. It's a company that provides a full range of corporate event services, from limos to team building to events to tours, excursions, and Courtney is their Director of Culture. But before we get into what you do for Koncept Events, Courtney, I would love for you to talk about you and what led you to Koncept. You have a really fascinating background, and your volunteer work is particularly intriguing. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Sure. I actually got into event planning before there was really a college degree for event planning or a defined career for event planning. I was the, even as a young kid, the organizer of things and activities and involved in stuff all through grade school and high school and college. And it was in college that I discovered that I could actually get into a program that would allow me to learn a little bit about the field to then go out and be into the field of events. I graduated with a little bit of knowledge in the industry, and then went and started working for a company that produced outdoor food festivals. And so they were large scale, about 450,000 people over a 3-day weekend event, kind of event, and really learned the ropes on everything that goes into planning something that's so intricate that so many people will come and enjoy. And so I continued in that for several years, producing festivals, concerts, a lot of charity events like 5K runs and walks, 10Ks, marathons, things of that nature. And then after I had done that for about 5 or 6 years, I had decided that what I really wanted to do is continue to push myself and challenge myself and grow within the industry. The events industry itself is vast. There are several different aspects of it. There are different ways you can be involved, and different parts of the industry that you can explore. And so I wanted to kind of remove myself from the outdoor world of events and jump into a more meeting planner role that had me working for a corporation. So I became an internal meeting planner for a medical education company. I spent about 5 years doing that and learned a lot, and then kind of got to the same point and was ready to move on to a different point in my career and challenge myself again and do something a little bit different, which is how I ended up at Koncept Events. The Koncept Events is what's called a DMC, which is a destination management company. And in many ways, what we do here kind of is a combination of what I used to do with my outdoor events and what I learned being a corporate planner. And so it's kind of fun to let all of those things collide and then learn new skills as well and continue to push forward with what I'm learning throughout my career and what I get to do on a day-to-day basis. So that's quite a bit of fun.
So as Don mentioned, you're the Director of Culture. What is
Yep.
a director of culture?
So we, as we have been growing here, when I started with the company, I've been here almost 7 years. And when I started, we were about an office of 8. Now we have an office of 40 plus. And so when we first started, there were like 2 job titles probably, and two groups of people working on specific tasks. And as we've grown, there have been specific things as a company that the 2 owners have wanted to focus on. And so a lot of those things kind of fall under my department. And then the director of culture was a title that we came up with to try to summarize what all of those things are. So I oversee all of our sustainability efforts. Those are our internal corporate operating efforts, as well as the external offerings that we work with our clients on. I work on CSR programs, which is corporate social responsibility. That is also our internal programs, as well as assisting clients in producing possible team builder events or offsite events that they'd like to do to give back to the community while they're here for their overall event. I work on our internal employee engagement, our internal continuing education programs for our employees. So we find it really important for everyone to stay up to date with what's going on in our industry and how it's constantly changing. And so we work hard to make sure that we have an education program that people can participate in, that they can continue on with their personal drives to learn more, to become certified. There's several certifications within our industry. So if people are interested in that, we have a program set up for that. So I really work on that and run that. And then I also still wear my old event manager hat, and I still work with one of our largest clients and help produce their event every year. So it's kind of a summary title, I guess is the best way to say it.
Okay. Talk a little bit about the most memorable event that you led. One that really sticks out for you.
To me, it's in some ways it's kind of a funny question because I feel like there's so many things over the years. I mean, I'm almost 20 years into my career, so you sit back and you start to think about the complexities of the things that we've put together and the hours and the time you've spent trying to plan every little detail. And the one event, if I really single it down, the one event that sticks out in my mind is last year in 2017, we took a group to Oahu, Hawaii, and we did an evening event at the USS Missouri, which is the old retired battleship that sits in Pearl Harbor. And you're able to use the pier, and the boat itself is essentially a living museum, and there's some area on the ship in the back that you can set up for a presentation of some kind. And so we set up the event, and in many ways it's one of the simpler events that I've ever set up. There's a lot of complexity to it because you're on an active military base, but in terms of elaborate decor or for example, the lighting that we put in, I think I used like 6 lights to illuminate the ceiling of the tent. Like we actually kept things really simplistic, and it was intentional. And we set up an evening where our guests arrived. They had a really nice dinner. We had docents set up throughout the ship itself, really talking through what the ship did, the importance of the ship. I don't know if anyone's aware, but that ship was really important. That's where the signing was to end World War II. It actually took place on this ship. So there's a lot of historical significance to it. And then we brought everyone to the tail of the ship where this tent area is and had them sit down. And we had programmed for them about a 2-hour, 90-minute or so program where we had the 2016 Miss America. She sang the national anthem. We had the presentation of colors by the military color guard. We had Colonel Oliver North, Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North. He came and spoke to the group, and then at the very end of it, we had a professional singer from Nashville. She came in and sang "God Bless the USA." it's one of those events where it all took place at sunset. We did a flag lowering. It was like everything, Mother Nature came together. All of our planning came together. People in the audience at multiple points, cried during the event because it was that emotional, and it really tied into what the client's goals and missions were, and it was a wonderful event. It was just, it's all the things you hope to bring together for a group, and it really worked out. It was wonderful.
It's interesting listening to you, because sometimes it isn't about being over the top, but sort of what the event really is, capturing the essence of that event and having it come forward, which is why I wanted to ask for you, what is the essence of the creative process for you? Because the way you look at each event is probably very specific, right?
It actually is. And that event is a really good example of that, I think. Oftentimes we're constantly looking at, more or less, you look at a ballroom space or maybe a blank space outside, and you're constantly trying to figure out how do I set up this space to wow the attendees when they walk in? How do I set up the space to, surprise them and to really give them a takeaway of having a fabulous experience? And as we had, when we sited the ship itself and we were walking through it, and, you're brainstorming, you're thinking about things, at one moment we all just sort of stopped, and I said, the ship is the wow. I said, we are here. This is a moment where we all have to sort of step back in our brains and take a minute and realize that this is the wow, the significance of it, the emotion that it stirs, the presence of it in Pearl Harbor. You can see the Arizona Memorial from the ship itself. It is the wow moment. It is the experience. And so we really then had to kind of step back in this moment and say, okay, what are the tweaks? What are the little things that we're going to put into place here that help emphasize that and help bring it, really bring it to light and allow everyone to feel that same feeling. And so it was an interesting event to plan, because in many ways, like I said, it was far more simplistic than a lot of other things that we typically do, and yet it was that much more impactful. So I think it's really important to keep your brain kind of tuned into that, and to realize when you really need to tune up the creativity and when you can really tune it down, in the fine line between doing that and having a great experience.
And shifting gears a little bit, because it is one of the critical areas that you lead, and you have a particular passion for, and that's sustainability. I would love for you to talk a little bit about that and some of the specific work you've done to minimize food waste.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So I always kind of joke that I blame my mom. It's my it's one of those like funny lines that I like to use. I'm an old soul hippie. I think my mom instilled a lot of things in us, from a living simplistic kind of standpoint when we were kids, and an eating healthy standpoint, and being kind of aware of your surroundings, that I've really carried through into my adulthood. And so when I'm saying things to people like, you shouldn't be using a straw, or like you shouldn't try not to use the plastic bag when you go to the grocery store, like I think about all the things that my mom did when I was a kid. And so I like to jokingly say that I'm a sustainability nut now, or what I call an old soul hippie now, because of my mom. but it is definitely a passion of mine. I think one of the things that always struck me from very early on in my event career was that and I'll back up a little bit. My degree in college is actually in recreation and leisure, and it's in the study of, which the degree itself is essentially the importance of recreation and leisure in your daily life for humans to live a full and complete life. Like, in order for us as individuals to reach our full happiness, like it's important for us to take moments and have leisure time, whether that's reading a book or taking a walk on the beach or what have you. Like it makes us whole. And so I've really kind of thrown a passion for that into my events, in the sense that you're producing something that gives people that sense of adventure and escape and a moment of stress-freeness, or those networking opportunities, or they're going to listen to music that they love. And so you're really contributing to the importance of them having a full and whole life on some level. And that varies from event to event and the type of event and what have you. But that was always something really important to me and why I really enjoyed and have always enjoyed being in this line of work. But then on the flip side, pretty early on, and especially in the early 2000s with festivals, there was so much waste. And I was always kind of struck by, the number of dumpsters, per se, we'd have to bring in, or how we had to maintain trash cleanup and things, and what was really going on, and how there was no real discussion about what was going to happen. And so as you move through your career and you start to learn more and more, and then you get into a place where you see more and more, in 2007, I started the company I was working for, we were part of a large trade show. And while we were one of those small 20 by 10 booths, they had the 100 by 100 booths and, setups that were 2 stories, and everyone's passing out some sort of giveaway, and everyone has all this paper product. And here we are at the end, you're tearing down and you're packing up your booth, and I'm looking around the trade show floor at the piles and piles and piles of paper goods and pens that people didn't take and all of these different things, thinking to myself, where is this all going? Like, what is happening? And it really started to, kind of that fire starts in your belly, and you start to move forward, and you're like, how can I do something? Like, how can I get involved? How can I start to make a change? And when I started at Koncept Events, the owners of the company actually had really, really kind of fun, basic things in place that they were already green conscious, so to speak. And so I thought, oh, wow, this is cool. Like they provide a place for you to store your bike if you want to ride your bike to the office. And they, we started having all these conversations, and there's certain people recycling programs they had in place and how they were using ink toner and some different things. And I'm like, well, maybe there's more that we can do here. Like, do you mind if I spend some time and I investigate this and see where else we can go? And that led me to finding out about one of the sustainability associations that we have in our industry, and attending a conference and getting a certification, and really starting to educate ourselves, and us starting to have more conversations internally about how we can drive ourselves forward and really be the leaders in producing events that are, generally speaking, less wasteful, as part of our goal. So that's kind of where the passion comes from, and how I kind of, continue to drive it forward to where I am today.
John, do you have any questions? I have so many more questions for her, but I would love for you to jump in if you have a specific question.
I do. Hi, Courtney. First, Courtney, your website and where people can reach you.
Oh, yes, that's conceptevents.com, and Koncept with a K, so that's always the kicker there. So KONCEPTEVENTS.com.
I'm going to go in a different direction and ask you, with the advent of the internet and how things have changed, and the evolving role of events, and where do you see the trend? Are people staying home more, or are events becoming more difficult to attract people? What are you seeing in the world today?
No, actually, we're seeing events grow. While there's that little bit that's going on in terms of some tourism coming into the U.S., the U.S. market. So the Koncept of events really works in the corporate market for events itself. So we're producing a lot of corporate incentive trips, corporate sales meetings, things along those lines. Everything within that segment seems to actually be doing very well. We had a very busy season. The busiest season in South Florida is from January until the end of May, and we've had an incredible season with some great events, and worked on a variety of different things throughout the last 6 months. And it's been I would say a high year for sure.
Really? Do you think it's because the economy is perking up, or what do you ascribe it to?
I don't know. I would guess that it's probably more of a combination of things. The event industry as a whole took a hit when the market turned down several years back, and as companies started to regroup from that economic downturn, the the dollars they were spending on meetings and events was kind of the last piece of it to come back. And so I guess I feel like they've, as the companies themselves have gone through their cycle of full recovery, that they're now devoting budget dollars back into meetings like they used to. And so I guess I feel like it's just that they've reached their resurgence point. I'm sure the economy plays into all of that, but I think part of it's just the cycle of that they're back to a place where budgets are allowing them to spend at a place where they can have more of their events, their face-to-face events, I should say, like they used to.
Well, now I'm going to hit you with a loaded question because it came up in one of my other shows just the other day. But the event industry is heavily weighted to females, and someone said in that show one of the reasons was that women have a greater capacity for checking off the details than men. My first question is it heavily weighted? And two, is that statement kind of correct?
Being a female, I'm going to say yes, that statement is correct. But in terms of the industry as a whole, I think you have to look at the different segments. I think industry itself skews, if you take the entire event industry as a whole, I think it skews very much that there are more females involved in the industry than there are males. However, if you start to break down the different segments, and for example, if you really look at the hospitality industry and you look at hotels and restaurants and catering companies, you're going to find that female to male ratio is much closer than it is if you look at internal corporate planners. Most internal corporate planners at a company are going to be female. So you look at if you really break down the audiovisual segment of our industry as a whole, it skews far more male than it does female. So I think it's a little bit skewed just to make a really general statement that says that the industry is female. I think there's a lot more males working in the industry that they get credit for.
Are you optimistic about the future over the next 2 years of the industry?
Oh, absolutely. The industry as a whole is the industry is really united, which I think is something that's unique. I don't know that it's something that you see quite so much, that even competitors come together to, share best practices and good ideas and things that really help drive us all as a whole forward. So we as a whole have a little bit of a sense of we're in it together and we're all going to make the industry better together. And I think that that's probably a little bit different than what you see in other industries.
Back to you, Ann.
Thank you, Don. Great questions. I'm going to shift a little bit back to waste, but I wanted to talk about, or sustainability, but I wanted to talk about some of the specific work you've done with minimizing food waste at shows. Okay. I should note that at the Fancy Food Show, our exhibitors donate their food. I believe it's still the biggest single event contributor to City Harvest in New York City. But I think that the whole issue of food waste is pretty big. I mean, we have a lot of hunger in this country and a lot of those kinds of issues, and yet we waste a lot of food, and that seems to be working at counter purposes. I just would love for you to talk a little bit about some of the things that you've observed and some of the things that you've done to minimize the whole area of food waste.
Yeah, and I think it's awesome what you guys are doing with the food show. That's amazing. I would encourage you to try. I know in the trade show world it's a little bit different because people are oftentimes showcasing probably new products and or something that they've come out with that's a little bit different from a previous year. But I think one of the best takeaways from doing a food rescue at an event is that it gives you unique insight into what foods your guests are not that interested in. So, for example, when I conducted a food rescue at one event, I found out that, that was primarily breakfast food. I found out that the group really doesn't eat croissants, that every day we had the only bread we were pretty much donating were croissants. So what does that tell me? That tells me that the next time I go and I set up a for this group that I probably don't have to put out any croissants and no one's going to miss them, right? So maybe challenge some of your exhibitors at the Fancy Food Festival or Fancy Food Trade Show and really talk to them about what are trends that you have noticed, like what foods you seem to always have left over, or what types of things, and maybe you can scale back on how many of those items you're putting out. While food rescues and donating that food are great, you're still putting a lot of stress on the environment to produce all of those things. So if you can minimize some of it on the front end, you're doing even a bigger and better service. So I think that's one kind of key takeaway that you guys might even be able to apply in your space, in your world. But do you want me to talk more about other ideas and options that we see at events?
Well, I did watch your YouTube video on food recovery tips, and I thought it would be wonderful for you to give the high points for our listeners and what your advice is.
Oh, sure. The best thing in terms of food recovery and food rescues is that you just want to start, and the earlier you start, the better. I think a lot of times we all get into that place of stress and complacency where we're like, oh my gosh, I can't add one more thing to my plate. It's really simpler to put a food rescue into play than what it seems. And I would guess that you could probably say that even at your large food show that you guys have. But if you start early and you really engage all of the stakeholders, it becomes a fairly simple process. Have your conversations with your hotel or your caterer or your venue. Reach out to the local soup kitchen or food pantry where you can donate. They are typically more than willing to bend over backwards and help you in any way they can to make it successful. And then the other big point that I like to make is that set someone as your point person. Set someone on your team as the designee that's really going to take it on and make sure that all the stakeholders talk together. I think that's a critical piece of it. And then just make sure that everyone talks through the plan. You don't want to find that you get to the end of an event and you're missing something like bins because you needed to transfer from one bin to another to make sure that the food can exit the facility that you're in. So make sure you talk through the details of that whole process and that every stakeholder understands what their piece of that process is going to be, and you're going to have a great and pretty easy food rescue.
So if you think about the future, do you have a vision for what should be done to minimize the negative impact to our natural resources? Are there other things that need to happen?
Yeah, I think, it's the general sense of waste. And that's kind of non-specific but specific. Here in South Florida, because we're here at the ocean, one of our Koncept events initiatives is ocean conservation. I mean, we're really involved in the plastic movement that's going on right now. There's a hashtag going around that's like pick up 3 pieces of plastic every time you go to the beach. And I mean, I've been living down here since 2006. I don't know that I've ever picked up less than 20 pieces of trash every time I've gone to the beach. But it's one of those things that it's creating that awareness to get people to become involved and stop and take a look at what's going on around them and their surroundings and to see that they can actually make a difference. And so we're really kind of trying to address all of those little points of waste. We're hopeful that we can make our own impact. Our recycling programs here in South Florida will not take plastic bags, and like many corporate offices, we have a lot of takeout lunch orders that happen on a daily basis, and every one of those takeout orders comes in a plastic bag, and so we actually have a separate trash bin now to put your plastic bag in, and there's the grocery store Publix here will recycle plastic bags, so then once a week or so, we empty the bin that we have, and we drive down to the Publix, and we put all of those plastic bags in the bin. Does it take somebody an extra few minutes out of their day to actually make that happen? Yes, of course. But are we making a much bigger impact on the environment? Absolutely. So I think really stopping and looking at how your office functions and how your team players function and how your events function, and just identifying 1 or 2 pieces, it's amazing how much of an impact you can have and help reduce the waste that you're producing.
So Courtney, I'm going to ask you a slightly different question then. If you were to give a commencement address at your alma mater, which is Florida State University, and congrats to the softball team. They won for the first time the national championship. Awesome. So that was really awesome. What advice would you give the graduates?
Well, first to the FSU girls softball team, high five. I was a softball player all my life, so proud of you guys. But for the commencement speech, I think my first statement would be never stop learning. It's so important throughout your entire life to continue to learn, to not stop asking questions, to really pursue your interests and where they're going to take you, and to never really lose your sense of adventure. That means something different for every single individual, but your sense of adventure, your sense of or craving for learning is really what's going to drive you forward and have the most impact on your life.
Well, that is wonderful. And with that, Courtney, I want to thank you so much for being on Food and Wine Insider. And Don, do you want to close this up for us?
We have been talking with Courtney Lohmann. She's Director of Culture. I love that title, by the way, of Concept Events. A link to her website will be on foodandwineinsider.com tonight. You can hear this and every other Food and Wine Insider program on the website as well. Also there, you can take a little survey and tell us what you would like to hear on Food and Wine Insider. Courtney, thank you so much for joining us. But before you go, will you give our listeners your website one more time?
Yeah, sure, no problem. The website again is conceptevents.com. That's concept with a K. Thank you so much for having me, you guys. This was such a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, thanks. Have a great weekend.
To be successful, most restaurant owners require extra capital from time to time. When you need funding to renovate, buy equipment, or manage cash flow, you don't have time to track down financial statements or wait weeks for a decision. That's where Kabbage can help. Kabbage gives small businesses access to a line of credit of up to $200,000. Apply online and you'll get a decision right away. Since Kabbage is a line of credit, you can take the exact amount you need. You never have to reapply to take additional loans, and you'll only pay for the funds you use. Kabbage has helped more than 230,000 businesses from every industry, and with $4 billion in funding, Kabbage is A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau and was named the Forbes Top 100 Companies twice in a row. Check out Kabbage at cabbageWithAK.com/foodandwine, and you'll get a $50 gift card when you qualify. That's KABBAGE.com/foodandwine.
Line of credit is subject to credit approval. See terms and conditions. All Kabbage business loans are issued by Celtic Bank, a Utah chartered industrial bank, member FDIC.
Dan Perkins here from Recalculating.biz with your featured book. I want to tell you about a recent interview I had with Bob Bethel, a turnaround specialist with lots of success in small business. Bob's new book is Strengthen Your Business, Fail-Proof Strategies for Small Business. He tells us of his life successes and failures that have made him and his clients so successful. Over the years, Bob has brought 77 companies back from the brink and changed them into thriving, profitable businesses. His energy is amazing, and at 74, he proves that you can still have a great deal to give others if you just try. His suggestions are easy to understand and very helpful. One insight struck me was that most companies do not have a plan. The old Chinese proverb says, if you don't know where you're going, then any road will take you there, is true today. Bob Bethel's book, Strengthen Your Business, can be found at Amazon.com or can be ordered at your local bookstore. This has been Dan Perkins with your Recalculating.biz featured book.
And being a chef is hard. Being an award-winning leading Boston chef is even more difficult. Joining us today is Steve Zimei, rated as one of the most creative chefs in Massachusetts. Steve, welcome to Food and Wine Insider.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Well, without further ado, I'm going to invite Ann to join us and talk about being a celebrity chef.
Yes, thank you, Don. And Chef, welcome to Food and Wine Insider. And you own Chops American Bar and Grill. I wanted to be sure to mention that. We'll see who drops their R's first, as I'm also a native of Massachusetts.
Oh, nice.
As I understand it, you went to Johnson and Wales University and you graduated in '95 with a degree in culinary arts. I'm always curious to know what inspired chefs to pursue a career in foods. What's your story?
Pretty, I think it's pretty similar to what a lot of young chefs, who are my age now, but, starting out in small, mom and pop restaurants in my hometown of Leominster, and just kind of grew from there. My first chef there was a CIA graduate, and he basically, brought me up from, being, a line cook, dishwasher to, running the kitchen at 15 years old, 16 years old with him. And that really just sparked a fuel of learning new things. And he was always, trying different projects and, bringing in new food locally, and really tried to get me involved as much as possible while I was still going to high school, and still, working 40 hours a week and going to school full time was tough. But that really inspired me to keep, pushing myself as much as possible. And that time, I'm not sure really what you want to do. But the culinary career, I think the restaurant business at that point really, fueled the fire for me to continue forward with that project.
So you've had so many experiences, and it seems that you've done every function in a kitchen and in a restaurant. Would you tell our audience a little bit about those experiences, what restaurants and in what capacities you've worked? Because I think people think of chef as just the head guy, but there's almost like an internship and a learning process that comes along with it. So Steve, talk a little bit about the experiences you've had since going to culinary school, because I think sometimes people think, wow, I'm going to be a chef and therefore I'm going to run a restaurant, but it doesn't quite work that way. That there's a lot of almost internships and things you have to learn along the way. And just talk really briefly about some of those experiences.
Oh, sure, absolutely. Like you said, going into the culinary field right after college, a lot of my experiences started with working from the ground up. I believe my first job working at Boston Harbor, I was working outside on the patio, for the season. Really didn't get to go inside too much, and I was very happy with that, to kind of see that side of the restaurant. It was a good introduction for me. So, I worked out in the patio. A couple of years later, I started working in the lunch department, working the grill, working the stations in the lunch, and kind of developed my way into the system at Boston Harbor. And that kind of gave me, and then obviously you move into a sous chef position, which is a little bit more managerial, also a little bit more development of the restaurant menus, working closely with the chef, who kind of sets aside, time for you to develop those menus with him. And then you move into the exec position again, where you're really driving the ship. I think that's the biggest thing is, getting the team on your side, making sure the menus are seasonal and functionable, and, obviously it's profitable. But you also want to be creative. And I think that's the biggest part of that.
Thank you for that. How important it is having a mentor in becoming a chef, and who was yours?
I think it's super important to have, one go-to person. And for me, it was a gentleman named Charlie, who went to CIA. And he was my first chef that I worked with when I was right out of high school and during high school as well. He really put the foundation for me of, I think he's the one that made me go into the culinary field, like it or not. Not that he pushed me, he just was so inspiring. And I went there weekly to learn new things. And, I was still in high school at that point. So he really pushed me to, to challenge myself. And at that point, I was running the restaurant, a local place here in Leominster at 15, 16 years old. So, he really wanted me to succeed. He actually said, make sure it's what you want to do. There's really, once you're in it 100%. There's no looking back. So he made sure I wanted it, but he also saw something in me. And I think he kind of pushed me in that direction too. And, I appreciated that from him.
And would you say that was his really most significant advice, making sure that you really love doing this, because it's hard work and you're going to do it a long time?
Exactly. He was probably in his early 30s, and I remember his kids being small, like mine are right now. For the most part, one of mine is small, and he had two kids at that point, and he was working, 50, 60, 70 hours a week. And he just wanted to make sure I knew what was coming. And he didn't actually say it. I could just see it. He didn't have to tell me what it was because I knew what the hours were. And I really took a long, hard look at that when I decided to apply to J&W. His words really resonated a lot with me. But his teachings was really, he's really easy to work with. He took his time with me, knife skills and sauce work and, how to actually run the kitchen. He was solo at that point. He had no sous chef, so he was there a lot. So I felt, happy to work with him and help him out, during my time with him.
If you had one moment to pick, what would that be in terms of being your proudest moment in your career?
For me, it came early on when I was voted, one of the top 5 sous chefs in the country. Back when I was at the Federalist, it was like a Bertolli olive oil competition, and they basically flew us out to New York, and we were able to cook for we were able to cook for the French Culinary Institute. All their execs and their high committee people were there. And that was one of the biggest things for me early on, being able to see, I never really went to New York too much to do that stuff. So it was almost like going to the James Beard for me. And as a young culinarian coming in, that was definitely one of the biggest things for me.
I've read that you work hard and play hard. What does that mean exactly?
For me, those words go, above and beyond the culinary field. And, it's constantly pushing myself, with my family, with my lifestyle. I'm a big cyclist. So, I always make sure, I'm on the healthy track of life. And also, making sure at work that we're also pushing the gamut and making sure that, we are trying new things and making sure we are always pushing the envelope to create the best meal that we can. I really, enjoy coming into work and also outside of work, pushing myself and always, making sure things are happening the way they should be.
And I would think because it really requires tremendous teamwork to make a kitchen operate properly. What are your approaches to developing your team in the kitchen? And then I'm going to have a follow-up question to that.
Okay. For me, like I've always done, is I like to show and lead by example. I'm really not an office chef. I'm always out there on the line with them and developing the team together. And, I think that they appreciate that, to be totally honest with you. It's a concept I've always done. We are always there for them, and without them, we're really nothing. And I always say that, even it goes down to the dishwashing level and that kind of staff too, who, are lead core people will see that, the more work you work with them, developing menus with them, having them make menus for you or even a recipe, it really pushes them a little bit. And then you can go forward with them and develop them into sous chefs, into executive chefs. We constantly promote people within our organization that come on board who have the passion, and we can see that, and they become sous chefs and they become chefs within the company. And that for me is the best feeling, is having a guy come in who worked one day on a sauté station, and 2 or 3 years later he's taken a management position.
Sure. Is my follow-up question was going to be, if I asked any one of them, what about you inspires them, what would they say?
I think I'm very even and, not too much of a hothead for them. In general, I think that I try to keep the calm of the kitchen going. And, I really try to keep them as happy as possible. Knowledgeable for, as far as training them and bringing them out to farms. That's something I try to promote with them. So I bring them to Vero Farm in Concord. I've taken them to a seafood exposition, and showing them other sides of the field instead of just working in the kitchen, and trying to get them to see what else is going on in the community.
Don, I have so many more questions for Steve, but I wondered if there was some burning question for you that you wanted to ask him.
There are, but I guess my question, as an outsider looking in, and people tell me that being a chef or being in the kitchen is really a 24/7 seven occupation, and that it leads to requiring an almost total commitment. Do you think that's true, Steve?
I agree 100%. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what any other professions like because I really haven't done anything else besides this. But it definitely is. I mean, you have to be available 24 hours a day because things happen overnight, and obviously things happen in the morning. Something's not being delivered. Refrigeration unit has gone down. A cook can't make it to the breakfast shift, and you have to be available all the time. And then it goes into service. Making sure you have all your mise en place and all your ingredients, and things happen constantly and they change constantly. I think that's maybe another reason why people love this industry too, because there's every day is different, and I think that's it's a great way to go and approach your work. Is like, wow, what's going to happen today? Some jobs become mundane, and it's definitely not an office job. But like I said, I think that's the kind of the thrill of working in the kitchen too for a lot of younger cooks, and is to see what's going to happen, and the developing of recipes, and obviously the specials that come out daily. It's definitely an intense atmosphere. Keeps you going for sure, and I think that's why a lot of chefs also like to exercise and get out of the restaurant and decompress a little bit.
Well, I guess my next question, but how do you maintain consistency of quality and taste? I'm always amazed that you can go into a fine restaurant and 99 times out of 100 the meal will be consistent. I'm always amazed. And to me, when I cook, no two meals are ever the same.
For us, it's a lot of recipe building and tasting. We'll go through a dish multiple times before it hits the menu item. And what I tend to do with my sous chef is basically put it on a special. So we'll work, 2 or 3 months out in advance and start tasting things out because menus change, every quarter, let's say. And then we get the cooks involved and say, okay, let's run this dish for the weekend. And you special it out with the cooks, and then you go into it with the servers. And those are potential menu items. But the backside of it is making sure you have, all recipes built and pictures taken. Now that we have, text messaging, we can kind of text pictures to all the cooks so that they have it on their phones, and making sure they see it. If they have to go back, they can always go back to it and look at it. And having us there as much as possible to, whether it be myself or my sous chef nightly, to make sure things are accurate.
Well, someone comes to you, a person says, I want to come into the industry. How do you choose and say this person looks like a potential chef or excellent kitchen worker? What are the things that you look for in a newbie?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell because you can't really just look at somebody, and we get it all the time. And the most, you can look at someone and say, this guy's never going to make it. He's not lacking the integrity. I don't see the spirit in him right away. So it's hard to tell right away to see what someone is lacking. But when they come in, you really right away, I think it's like within a couple of days, you can say, okay, this guy's going to make it. He's tasting everything. He's asking me questions and the right questions. And you can see that person has developed a certain taste or the desire to learn from you. The more questions they ask, the better, obviously, and no question is bad. But they're really inspired to go to the next level, whether it's, doing something that I never asked them to do, and they're taking this step forward without me asking. To me, that's huge. Doing something that I can already see that they should be doing, they're taking that next leap forward.
The name of your restaurant again, how people can reach you, and your website?
Yeah, we're Chops American Bar and Grill in Burlington, Mass. We're located in the Boston Burlington Marriott. We are chopsamericanbarandgrill.com.
Can you spell it out for our radio audience?
Yeah, it's CHOPPS AmericanBarandGrill.com. Wow.
What a great one. Ann, I'm going to turn it back to you. I have a lot of questions. It's been fascinating, but please going back.
Yeah, I'm going to continue on the whole question of people because I I would think that there are some difficulties with keeping people as well, because people evolve, they get new experiences, they might not be able to have those experiences at your location, they go elsewhere. And then I want to talk a little bit about sort of the constraints of the minimum wage on a restaurant owner. But the first question is, how difficult do you find keeping people keeping your team together?
Pretty difficult. Like the current operation I'm at, not so much. Being a Marriott hotel, we tend to, my staff, for instance, has been there, 15 or 20 years, which I think is amazing. I mean, I really do. I haven't seen a place that I've worked that has had that much, has had many people stay that long. So I absolutely love that, and going into work every day is a joy because everybody's super happy and they all want to be there. In the past, absolutely, small restaurants where I've worked in Concord, Massachusetts, let's say, really, really difficult to keep staff because they'll bounce, to the restaurant down the street for $1 more, or even, less than that, depending on, what their circumstances are. So it is really difficult to keep staff. You just need to keep them happy, listen to them, making sure that they're happy and giving them what they want for the most part. You have to bend over backwards a lot of the times for them, but yes, it's increasingly getting harder within the past 5 years or so.
So somebody wanting to be in the restaurant business, what do they need to really pay attention to in terms of their percent of expenses? I mean, how much is, employees versus the food versus your overheads, this kind of thing, just to give them a sense of, wow, you've got to really pay attention because these are the things that are going to eat into your profits pretty significantly.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The cost of hiring an employee, just the training and part of that is huge. So you spend a week with them, train them, get them up and ready to go. And then, a week later, they either decide they don't want to stay there. It's not the right fit. All of a sudden, it's not the right thing for them 2 weeks later. And then, to be honest with you, most of the times they don't really even give you a notice. They end up just leaving. And then you're wondering, okay, where is this guy? So, yeah, it can be super difficult. I mean, you really need to, make sure in the interview process that, that everybody knows exactly what they're walking into. And I'm pretty honest with them and making sure schedules are, what they want. And, there's no hidden factor there. So I know what to expect out of them and they know what to expect out of me. So hopefully you don't have to run into those issues of, hiring. And then, 2 weeks later, I'm already down a cook that would cost me, $1,000 to train.
Right. And then on the other side, which is your food costs, talk a little bit about your sustainable practices and how you minimize waste, because, boy, waste can eat into your profits as well, right?
Absolutely. We try to, and I do, go to local farms on my way to work as much as possible. We get 2 deliveries a week, and that is pretty much mostly produce, vegetables locally. I do a couple farmers markets a week. I also cook at one, 3 times a year. And I think it's a great way to get the sustainability of, and obviously drive my costs down. We always have a compost at work, and that's a big thing for us. So we recycle all that stuff, and we try to use, not the high end stuff on the fish. We try to source maybe not, some different fish to kind of keep that sustainability going. Everybody loves halibut, but maybe they'll want to try something like a scup or something that would love to, bring in a different fish that people might not see somewhere else.
Okay. You mentioned earlier that you're an avid runner and a cyclist, and you've ridden for Chef Cycle, which has to do with No Kid Left Hungry. What is it about this particular charity, and what message do you want to get out to the world about children and hunger?
For me, when I joined this project with Chef and Cycle, being able to, donate and feed the less, the kids who don't have enough food, especially now that, we're getting out of summer and, the schools tend to do a lot of that for us. So, that inspired me to make sure that I can give as much as I possibly could, having my own, kids as well, and making sure that, a lot of kids can have food daily. And I think that, people forget about that a lot of the times. So we ride and we do a lot of dinners and special projects and pop-up events for them and donate our time and our money to the chef cycle. But yeah, as we go through the summer, it's even more important. It's like 1 out of 6 kids are hungry, and we need to make sure that we are supporting that.
You have 3 boys. I think I got that right.
That's correct.
Do any of them cook, and are you the chef at home?
No, they used to. I did like an Iron Chef once with them, a few years ago, and and they like it. Obviously, it's not something that they're passionate about. But yes, I do all the cooking here for the most part. My wife does a little bit here and there, but I tend to do it mostly on, like, now that summer's here, it's a much easier process for me. So yeah, I try to do as much as I possibly could on one of my days off.
What's your favorite meal? What's your favorite meal? The favorite meal that the boys like you to make?
Absolutely steak tips for sure. I can't go a weekend without going to go get steak tips, and we do a ton of grilled vegetables. That's kind of what my wife and I eat the most of. So it's mostly grilled vegetables for us and mostly all protein for them.
I would imagine people think of the chef life as a glamorous life. I don't know why they think that, but what advice would you want to give for a budding chef?
I would absolutely, for someone coming into the culinary career, I would just make sure, again, that it's something that they want to do. I think a lot of the young culinary kids that come in, want to be the Bobby Flay of the world, and it's tough to get to that point. You really need to put your time in, learn from the people you are working with, and not coming in thinking they know already everything from, a culinary school. And just listening, I think, is a big thing. Listening to who you're working with, understanding what's going on with different concepts of restaurants, and really just diving into it full force and putting your time in and working your way up. I think it's important that you do work your way up and not just stay stagnant, and take different jobs, a couple of years and see what everybody's doing. Travel would be huge. If you can do it, great. I think that's another big plus is seeing the world and seeing different things and in different countries and even in the States. I think that's something I couldn't do, but I would suggest that they would try to do that.
Well, Chef, I want to thank you so much for being on the program today, and I'm going to turn it back to Don.
Thank you very much.
We've been talking with Steve Zimei. A link to his wonderful restaurant and website will be on Food and Wine Insider tonight, where you can hear this and every other Food and Wine Insider program. And you also can tell us via survey what you think about the show and what more you'd like to hear. Steve, thank you so much for being with us. It's been really illuminating.
Thank you very much.
Now it's time for Andal's thoughts on what's happening today.
Sustainability is a complex topic, but in simple terms, it basically means meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. It involves how we can and should think differently about production and processing and distribution, consumption and waste management. And why we should focus on those things is to positively impact the environment, the economy, and social health. I'm not intending to preach here, but an area of certainly of concern, it's not only in the restaurant business but in the food business, is waste. It's almost inconceivable to me that people can go hungry in the U.S. and certainly in many places around the world, but we waste 30 to 40% of the food supply. We want our fruits and vegetables to look perfect. We may not care that our portions are bigger than they need to be, and yet then they're not really fully eaten. But what's happening? I think the stories that aren't happening is the things that I have personally seen in so many wonderful local. They could be non-for-profit. They could be supported by for-profit companies at the local level. Gleaning programs, meal pack programs. You have City Harvest. You have City Meals on Wheels. You have so many different great programs. It just takes getting involved, because we might not be able to change things at the national or the state level, but we can certainly help our local communities and our neighbors. And I think we all have a role to play in that, and to make a difference and make sure that the future continues to be bright and that people are fed, and we do all the good things that bring communities together.
You've been listening to Food and Wine Insider with Ann Daw and Don Mazzella. Want to join us on a future show? Contact us at foodandwineinsider.com. Until next time, have a passion for food, wine, and profits, and think of our program, Food and Wine Insider.